The year is 2025 in the once Great Britain, and things are very scary and are declining fast. The nation is under invasion every single day. The invasion being directly facilitated by the government and being facilitated by successive governments for generations, as the native population has been exploited more and more on their path to serfdom. Many towns and cities in all of our nations have been ethnically cleansed in a way that we've never ever seen in any of our nation's histories. As the colonization continues, we've become increasingly divided, unsure who our real enemy is, and increasingly are at each other's throats, when we really should be uniting against the common enemy. Had we seen the signs and learned from the past, maybe we wouldn't have been in this position. However, seeing the state of affairs and seeing what is to come if this trend continues, many have now taken it upon themselves to join up and serve in the British Uprising. And that is where today's story begins. My guest today, ladies and gentlemen, spent many years in the Royal Marines, however was unceremoniously kicked out after highlighting a plague that was encroaching more and more on our armed forces every single day. The plague of DEI.
You've served in the armed forces in the past, if I'm not mistaken, and now you say you're serving in the British Uprising. Mind giving a little bit of information as to what you mean by that?
Been booted out of the armed forces for, officially been booted out of the armed forces for speaking to the press as a result of the DEI whistleblowing thing that I was involved in.
Since losing his career for daring to speak the truth and stand in the way of the cult of DEI, John has now transitioned into serving in the British Uprising, highlighting many of the prominent political issues of the day, not least of which in importance is the everyday invasion of our home.
We're going to be invaded, but I would argue the invasion is happening as a side point. The negative effects that are as a result of demographic change and the southern border invasion are much worse than what we have taken in multiple other wars. Do you know what I mean?
Having spent much of his early life in some of the poorest areas of Africa, John saw firsthand the plight of genuine refugees in these areas who are fleeing war and fleeing persecution. As such, he effortlessly highlights how these people coming across on the boats coming through the border every single day are not, for the most part, in fact, genuine refugees, but are opportunists here to take over.
Yeah, okay, so we lived in Burundi. It's right on the border with the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And that whole region, and I mean, Africa's almost always in some state of war. The average salary in Burundi is $200 a year. They're practically like African, Arab, like Nepo babies, basically. I don't know how they got their money, but, likely not through legitimate means.
With Britain being an absolute third world colonized laughingstock in the eyes of the rest of the world, and its native population on track to being a minority in the next generation, we really need to wake up and we really need to start taking action. Because the government, ladies and gentlemen, has no intention of letting up. We have nobody to look out for us but ourselves.
And I was talking about, what is the first truly Islamist country that will get a nuclear weapon? And we were like, maybe it's Iran, maybe Pakistan already kind of counts. And then we sort of finally decided maybe it's actually the UK, since Labour just took over.
Nobody else is going to look out for us. And why would we expect anybody else to look out for us? Why would we expect anybody else to keep our affairs in order?
If it can happen in London, if it can happen in Birmingham, in our biggest cities, it can happen in our smallest little towns and hamlets. And something needs to be done.
In Wales, or at least many areas of it, with it still being very, very ethnically homogenous, it's very difficult sometimes to appreciate the struggles that others are going through, the struggles that our brothers and sisters in England, Scotland, Ireland, and even in our cities are going through. I don't think enough people realize what minoritization truly means, ladies and gentlemen, the ramifications of it.
The minute we become a minority and we have no say anymore, that's basically the equivalent of having no rights whatsoever, because we've surrendered our ability to change those things in any democratic fashion.
Make no mistake, if that were to happen, there would be no minority rights campaigns for us. There would be no affirmative action for us. There would be no diversity, equity, and inclusion for us, ladies and gentlemen. We would very soon be removed from the gene pool. My guest, however, does understand that very well. This is Voice of the Valleys with Mr. John Carr. Enjoy.
Hey there guys, welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host, Mr. It's kind of fake really. You know, you would have seen in the last interview I'd done, I have the lordship on the back over there, but it's kind of fake. So Mr. or Lord, you can call me whatever you want, George Cresswell. But anyway, I mentioned that we had a very interesting guest coming on the podcast today from the Scottish nationalist scene, Mr. John Carr. I wanted to bring John on. I became aware of John's activities through other people that I've spoken to in the past. You guys would have seen Josh Fernie, James Monroe, and so on. Checked out John's YouTube channel, found a lot of interesting stuff. I would imagine we're going to be talking a lot about that today, particularly, again, Scottish nationalist scene and really how it reflects across the entirety of the UK as well, really, because a lot of the sentiment that's shared between nationalists in England, nationalists in Scotland and Wales seems to be very, very similar. So I'm going to hand you over to John just so we can give you a little bit of an intro to himself now. And a very big thank you, John, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good, mate. Thank you very much for having us on. It's an honor and privilege to be here speaking with you today. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. So just shoot away if you have any questions or anything. I'm happy to answer.
First off, really, the biggest thing is I got from your ex bio, which I see is quite interesting. You mentioned I believe it's in reference to when you say serving, you've served in the armed forces in the past, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And now you say you're serving in the British Uprising. Mind giving a little bit of information as to what you mean by that and how you see this and what is meant by serving in the British Uprising?
It's a good question. I suppose the context of it would be that, you know, I was serving the armed forces, you know, we're supposed to be fighting our nation's enemy, that sort of thing. But now obviously I've been booted out of the armed forces for, I've officially been booted out of the armed forces for speaking to the press as a result of the DEI whistleblowing thing that I was involved in. We can talk about that in the podcast, but I suppose it's not so much of a throwaway comment, actually. Like, it is, I did think about it for a second. I was like, what am I doing? I'm serving in the British Uprising now, you know. Our people are being targeted from every angle, and I'm in a unique position where I can say what I want now. Yeah, a lot of people aren't capable of doing that and need people to stand up for them. So that's what I'm doing. I wouldn't necessarily, I think serving is maybe the right word, because I wouldn't necessarily have chosen this as a career or anything. But I kind of see it as a duty at this point, because nobody else seems to be doing it. So long answer, but that would be why I wrote that there.
That's kind of how I see it as well. And when I'm talking to other people as well, you mentioned there the word duty. It's kind of how the way that I see it as well. And I think we're both in a similar position as well for various reasons. You mentioned you're speaking about DEI, and that's why you were removed from past job role and stuff like that. I'd like to go into that in a moment. But I think in my initial message, I mentioned, you know, I was also removed from a job position due to expressing political opinions and stuff like that. And
how long ago was that?
A couple of months ago.
Right.
A couple of months ago it was. And again, it was a private company. I don't necessarily hold anything against them. They can, you know, do whatever they want. They can have whatever policies they want, you know, and they can remove people that publicly express views that they don't agree with. So I don't hold anything against that, but it's emblematic of the current society that we're in, that for things completely outside of work and for comments that at the time I'd actually made before I'd even started there, they couldn't put a single complaint in with me, or at least they didn't have a single complaint against me for what I did in the job. And it was because of things that I expressed outside of that. That's why I ended up losing that. And you bring up duty, you bring up, again, being a voice for people. It's almost, bolstered me to try and go even further and actually take this a lot further now. And I think the common phrase is you don't take flack unless you're over the target. I think a lot of us, because we're taking that flack, we're over the target. Would you mind going about what were you specifically speaking about that led to them removing you? I've spoken to somebody in the past who served and tried to bring up the DEI stuff. Tim Davis, I think it was, he tried to bring it up, and he's had a lot of thing from speaking about DEI in the military. What kind of stuff was you bringing up, if you don't mind me asking?
Similar thing to Tim, I suppose, where he was witnessing in the RAF this huge political push to get women through, to put women in higher positions for, political victories, basically. So what's the big context? Well, I suppose the greater context is the Royal Marines it's as elite as you can get in the infantry world of the armed forces, right? And we have incredibly high standards, and we have incredibly high standards for a reason, because when we're as Royal Marines do go into frontline positions around the world, or even just dangerous places of any kind, you need to be like top 0.1% of men who you need to be able to sustain yourself. You need to be able to help the lads in incredibly tricky situations where potentially somebody's been shot. You need to go over, you need to get them on your back, and you need to take that person out of harm's way. That is the general context that led me to question what was happening with women in the Royal Marines, where it was abundantly clear to everybody in the Royal Marines, everyone's talking about it, is that they were pushing women through who weren't meeting these standards. So they would say, "Oh, we don't lower the standards, we don't lower the standards," and that's generally their response to this. But they were pushing women through that weren't meeting the standards. Everybody was watching it. Everybody could see them, because a lot of these tests happen in front of the whole troop, in front of, people can watch on, and people were witnessing these women who weren't meeting the standards. And for me, that's to cross the bridge to your average person that may be listening to this thinking, "Oh, what's your problem with women?" It's like, I don't have a problem with women at all. What I had a problem with was the idea that if I didn't say anything about this, that everybody could see this was an incredibly dangerous, potentially dangerous situation. If I didn't say anything about these women who weren't meeting the standards, who were being pushed through, that could result in one of my friends being killed. And yeah, that, like you say, before duty, I just realized, okay, I can either cower here and sort of, not stand by what I know to be true because I'm afraid of my job, or I'm afraid of retribution, or any of these sorts of things, or I can just do the right thing. So it's not been easy, but I went and just did the right thing, put a petition together, mate, and just got the petition around the Royal Marines. Everybody signed it, man. Like in a day, like a third of the corps signed it before they shut it down. Yeah, it's just that's how I got into that situation, and their response to that was, I don't know, the more politically savvy people that are watching this would understand that I was in the way of a very big political movement where this pushing women in isn't so much about being nice, more so about putting loyalists in positions of power and enabling a situation where they can have the military be as compliant as the police are. So that's a general sort of context of the situation. How about yourself, mate? I mean, I suppose you may not, if it's a private company or whatever, you may not want to talk about so much about it, but if you want to talk about your situation, I'm happy to hear.
Well, all mine was, and that's a thing from coming from a completely different sector. So as you mentioned, I started talking about politics and all of these different issues just because I was going on X. I was seeing so many of these clips coming up of, typically regarding people highlighting stuff that people were coming over from other areas of the world and doing things that would not be acceptable here. And I'm just like, well, I'm seeing so many of these things. And when I first started becoming more politically active in this stuff, I watched, like, for example, Tommy Robinson's series on Rumble, The Rape of Britain. And, I understand he's quite a divisive character, has his, both from the right and the left, it seems people have, good and bad things to say about him. But it was my starting point, and then gradually learn more and more and more from there. But I thought, well, hang on, this needs to be talked about, because this could be my community. This could be, it's like, Oldham or Rochdale or all these other areas, Glasgow, Edinburgh, etc. Today, it could be my area tomorrow. And quite funny, later on, after all this happened, one of the counties that was identified in Rupert Lowe's list of 85 counties he identified was being complicit in covering up sort of scandals of this nature. I'm not exactly sure if it's specific in this, but they're literally a county just over from me. And it's not a county in any way that's been taken over in many of the other ways that you've seen counties in England being taken over. So it's very, very scary. But I was just like, I'm going to speak about this on the platform I had at the time. It was a podcast which I had to talk about personal training stuff, because that's my background. I'm a health and fitness guy, right? I literally called myself the political PT for a while. That's actually what I called myself. And then what happened was I was just talking about that, and then when I went into work in this gym, wasn't long after, one of the guys, because I had it still linked in my link tree at the time, had gone and found some of the episodes where, a lot of the times I just talked about like a new study that had come out, maybe to do with like cold water immersion or heat therapy or whatever, or different training practices in a new study that's just come out. But then I was also talking about the other stuff and highlighting how we're going more and more into government tyranny to try and cover this up. I was pulled into a meeting and basically just said, completely honest, right? And they just basically said that then, oh yeah, well, can't be, services are no longer required, basically. It's quite thing how I think they said they made it quite easy for them because I was still on my probation period in the role at the time. I'd only been there about sort of 2 months, I think it was. But like I said, it's just in the gym, because past comments, all of the comments that were referenced, broad categories being, for example, anti-immigration, anti-Islam, anti-feminist. Those being the broad, categorizations. And then I was like, well, on the parts where they said parts I thought that they were quite inaccurate with how I recounted things. I was like, I don't think I've actually said that. But then again, they just said, well, your services are no longer going to be required. And I was let go that same day.
How did that feel, man?
So it's just, again, emblematic of the current political atmosphere that's going on. Obviously, I won't name the place, but yeah, it's just try and speak about these things because, again, in Wales in particular, I see it as the situation is not quite as, at least it seems to me, not quite as progressed as other areas in the UK, especially England and some of the big cities in Scotland and stuff like that, where I know you've been at some of the protests. And I do have to say, very gifted public speaker. I do have to say that. I don't know whether it's just a passion coming through and stuff like that. Very gifted public speaker.
Oh, man, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I was listening to one of your speeches whilst I was working the other day. I think I might have been editing or something like that. And I was like, fair play. Really,
thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
You can tell when somebody really truly believes it in the way that they speak it. But yeah, I kind of lost my track there for a moment. But yeah, like I said, just they said my services were no longer required, and I thought, well, hang on, this just makes it even more necessary to carry on doing it, because we've seen how much the government, the media, all of these other entities will lie, right? And they're trying to push these very sinister agendas. And you mentioned there, the most sinister thing I took away from what you said there was that they're trying to put loyalists in positions of power in order to politicize them. To politicize them in the way that they've done the police, and we've seen that they've done that to the police already in a terrifying degree. I can only imagine the ramifications if that was the military. And would you say then that has actually, again, I think I probably already think how you're going to answer this question. Would you say that's made the military as a whole weaker or stronger?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely made us weaker. There are dividing lines where there didn't used to be dividing lines. There are, let's think of a specific example. You back in the day, you would usually be in, if you had a day off, you'd be doing, you'd be practicing your skills and drills. Now you're sitting in a lecture room being lectured about diversity. Now you're sitting in a lecture room being told about, the sexual harassment, what do you call it, policies of the armed forces, and now you're in the lecture room being told about, just being fed political messaging. And does it contribute to operational effectiveness? Absolutely not. And there are, look at history. There are times when it is necessary to have people that are capable of defending the nation. It kind of seems like a weird thing to say at the minute, because what, we're going to be invaded? We're going to be invaded, but I would argue the invasion is happening. As a side point, we can talk about that, but
I completely agree with you.
Weakness is never a strength. Weakness is never a strength, and whether it's now, a few weeks from now, a few months from now, they will reap what they have sown in this instance. And I think some people will, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, if you have foreign interests or not, that's a good thing or a bad thing. But for the people of this island, it's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it's exactly as you mentioned. It's nothing to do, as you said, with people being women or whatever other characteristic people want to put in. It's the fact that, say for example, wherever you may have been. How long were you in the Royal Marines, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, just a few years, mate. Just a few years. It's a slightly depressing question to answer, because there's so much I wanted to do, and contribute. But that being said, I would do it again 100 times. But yeah, just a few years.
No, but seriously, no. Thank you. Honestly, thank you for your service, and
cheers,
not only that, the service. No, but the service you put in as well of being willing to speak about these things when so many seemingly weren't willing to at least put themselves in the firing line, and putting yourselves in the political firing line. There's something to be said for that, with how much it can ruin your life in terms of what people then say about you, your character being assassinated, and trying to find future work and all of these other things. But it's literally, as you mentioned, and I've seen that Pete Hegseth and other leaders in the US, Kash Patel and people like that, for saying that there's going to be basic fitness standards in like the FBI and the military and all of these things. They're saying, oh, well, that just means you're sexist, you're against women. Be like, no, well, if they can do it, they can do it. It matters that if, for example, you were to, try and go from cover to cover and you end up getting shot and you're down on your back in the middle of, some alleyway or some road or whatever, that your squad mates can lay down suppressing fire and get you the hell out of that situation. That's ultimately what matters. Doesn't matter what set of chromosomes you have at that point. It just matters that you're strong enough to do the job. And the thing you mentioned there, we've become, again, through the public school system as well, and the increased feminization of the society, to see weakness as a virtue. I always like the parable. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And where we've gone now, and we've seen all of these different ways to show our weakness as a virtue. It's just showing the rest of the world. The rest of the world is seeing that and being like, oh, well, let's have a bit of that. They're showing how weak they are. Let's go and take advantage of them. And that's why we're seeing now that we have no guiding principles in British society. It's increasingly being taken over by those who do. And usually that's coming then from hostile foreign cultures as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why, again, it makes it all the more important to speak up on those things. And I think as well, you'd be actually, I don't know if anybody else may have mentioned this, the one thing that popped up to me as well, you're doing the women a favor as well, at least from how I see it. Because if there was to be that they were put in that position, and then because they knew that they couldn't do it, they'd end up costing one of their squad mates their life. Right. And they knew, because they've been pushed through for political reasons, it wasn't because of their aptitude, it wasn't because of their merit. If tragedy was to happen, that's going to weigh on them as well. And they could have been saved from that if they weren't pushed into that by those who were above them acting in political interests, I think.
Yeah, I try and not necessarily, like, I see that as like a side, because I think all too often people make arguments from, you know what I mean, like when we're saying that we don't, if for instance, if I was to say, okay, I want to have a homeland, I want to have a more or less homogenous society here. A lot of people feel that need to be like, but it would actually be good for the Africans, for them to keep all their really smart Africans or whatever. And then I don't know. So I'm not like gatekeeping, but I will say, yeah, absolutely. Like, these people that are pretending that they are, like, I generally frame it from the lads and what could happen to the lads. But on the flip side, totally, I agree. How is it good to be pushing women through on these false pretenses? It's like Joseph in his coat of many colors in one way, is that you're pushing these people into a situation where it's like you think you're doing a positive thing by giving them more than everybody else, but you're actually, you know, robbing them of the dignity of being somebody that's earned what they have. You know, by the end of training, if there is a woman that passes out training one day, nobody's going to believe it. Nobody's going to think of that person. Nobody's going to respect them. Everybody's going to think, okay, they were pushed through. And maybe there is a woman that could pass training. You know, maybe there isn't. When that time comes, or if it doesn't, or sorry, if it comes, you won't be a nice guy for having pushed these girls through. You know, it's for the men and also for the women, just an incredibly bad situation.
Mm-hmm. I can't help but agree. It's like you want everybody on that battlefield or whatever it is to be on the same page, you know, same level of training, you know, passed on their own merits, and as a result, they're sure of themselves, and then they're going to have their you know, their squad mates or their comrades back in the best way. Mm-hmm. One last thing on this, and it's because I've seen a lot of a video about World War II in particular, and about how veterans looked at their service, you know, those who survived and come back from World War II, and when they were interviewed in, you know, our modern day, I can't remember the exact time frame, maybe it was around the turn of the millennium or just later on, and they were asked about, you know, reflecting on their service, reflecting on the sacrifices they'd made. And in that regard, a lot of them, at least from some, you know, videos I've seen on YouTube by some accounts, a lot of them did not have very positive things to say based on how they've seen the country turn out, you know, in the modern day, or maybe how now they see maybe how things were political a way they didn't see them before, or whatever. You know, hindsight is 20/20, as they say. Reflecting on your service, elements of that, what are your reflections? Did the outlook on things change from when you signed up to when you were eventually removed due to things like the politics and stuff like that?
In what sort of way? So could you outlook on the military or outlook on politics in general?
Yeah, so I suppose we're saying, like, a lot of people, for example, more so on the military. So I think some of them as well, seeing the more wider political things, they look back on their service, whether it may be, particularly with regards to conflicts in the Middle East, like Libya and stuff like that, when they're now looking back and seeing it for the political moves that they were in. And I'm thinking, I think some people would be thinking that, oh, maybe I wouldn't have signed up if I knew that's what I was going to be doing, and if I'd known that was going to be the thing that I was doing. I want to stress, obviously, this is not in any way to disrespect anybody's service or anything like that. But I'd like to know, as your perspective on your service in line of what you were being told to do and the initiatives you were maybe being told to support have changed at all.
Okay. So maybe uniquely for me, I was more or less aware of the military-industrial complex. I was more or less aware of all the political things that I am aware of now. Miyamoto Musashi has this thing where he basically splits society or people into a number of different places that they're sort of born to be, or not necessarily born to be, but, you know, you've got your warriors, you've got your farmers, you've got your, you know, your builders, you've got your merchants, that sort of thing. And I've just always been drawn to combat. I wanted a career in combat. I wanted to be a cage fighter for a number of years, to be honest. Until I realized it wasn't quite the life that I wanted. And I thought, okay, if we do end up, and I was actually, okay, I was slightly different. I thought, okay, if we end up in a war with China, I don't want to be in, and this is where I was thinking, oh, we'll end up with a war with China. So I want to have all these skills and be in amongst the lads. I want to be a part of a brotherhood. And, you know, made that shift from sort of cage fighting to the real martial arts, you know, the real sort of, you know, the real war, as it were, even though we're not necessarily at war. But so I initially I wanted to join because I thought, okay, we're going to be at war with China potentially, and that sort of changed by the time that I joined. To be honest, I thought, nah, we're not going to really end up at war with China. We've got much bigger fish to fry domestically, you know. And I was aware of that all the way through trading, and you know, my time in the Corps. So uniquely, my position didn't really change very much. It was more so perhaps a doubling down of what I already knew to be true, is that, you know, the biggest thing that is happening to society is demographic change. We're being invaded by the southern border. Those are some of the biggest negative aspects of, like, put it in the past, like if this was happening in the past, you know, the negative effects that are as a result of demographic change and the southern border invasion are much worse than what we have taken in multiple other wars. Do you know what I mean? Especially when you look at the child victims, when you look at the female victims, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when I was sitting there eating my food that I'd paid through the nose for, and was just thinking, I can't believe I'm paying through the nose for this tiny portion of food when you've got a bunch of people from halfway around the world that, you know, you might have heard in my speech the other day, like, I used to live in Africa. I know what a refugee looks like, right? And we've got these piss takers, these 20-something-year-old men that are here getting stuff for free, you know, and then on top of that, when it was, that's one context that applies to a vast majority of the people in the Corps. That's why morale is so low, because we don't feel like we're being used to fight the war that we should be fighting in the southern border. I'm kind of going in a tangent here, but I will link it back in.
No, it's no problem at all.
And then the second thing, big doubling down of realization that I already knew was the sort of the dividing lines that they want between men and women. They don't want men and women to coexist in the workplace. They want men and women to be at odds in the workplace. They don't want, you know, they don't want equality. These people, it's not on their remit. And to see that firsthand and to witness it in the military and witness potentially people's lives being sacrificed at the altar of DEI, that was for me just like, okay, I know this. I know what I'm looking at here. I'm aware of the politics that are around this. This is the enemy. You know, we can talk about, there's Russia. Oh, Russia, you know, they've got a smaller economy than California and they're not invading us. But we are being invaded. Our culture is being eroded. The negative effects that our people are being victimized by. Those are the invasion, the eroding of our culture. So that is our enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understood that before I joined, because I just want to be a warrior. Like, I want to be, I feel like I'm kind of born to just, I like combat. So I joined and was aware of that anyway, went in and just, I wasn't expecting to leave on such terms, but yeah, long answer, sorry. But definitely just a doubling down of what I already knew. And by the time that I left, it was very apparent to me that I was fighting the right fight, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I suppose the way it might be different for yourself if you sort of seen that going, if you already had that political insight going, and I can see how you might have already, you know, been a little bit more switched on, maybe, so to speak, as to what the actual wider game was, the actual wider sinister agenda. And it is a very, very sinister one indeed. You mentioned conflict between men and women and how that's eroded, you know, the culture. You know, you only got to look back, you know, 100 years or whatever. I look back at photos of like my old high street in a town where I grew up like 100 years ago, and it looks completely different. You know, the shops over sprawling, men walking about, dressed up, even in areas like mine, which are quite relatively low socioeconomic, for a better term, for lack of a better term, rather, old mining town.
Yeah, people took pride,
but
though,
again, absolutely,
people took pride.
Absolutely. And with the more and more push for an increasingly feminized culture, with the feminist ideology, which is directly putting a wedge between men and women, directly putting a wedge in between them and especially against the family, against the family institution. And now we're seeing that manifest in the fact that not only, again, issues people debate, but like abortion, but the fact that I looked up in Wales the other day, the natural changes in population, i.e. reference to the native population, is actually decreasing. It's on a negative trajectory, and we're not able to sustain ourselves anymore. And obviously now people then use that, politicians, very politically savvy people use that, being like, oh, well, we need more people coming in. And it's like, it's a very, very destructive cycle. And that's where, again, a lot of things that we have to look at. A lot of things we have to look at is people obviously coming in and bringing up this hostile culture, which is supplanting ours. And in many instances, usually people having multiple wives, very large families, and it's a very large, attractive voting bloc for politicians that want to just throw us under the bus. But then in some ways as well, we don't do ourselves any favors in that regard. And one of the big things I see people not doing themselves any favors is when, in an attempt to virtue signal, they're bending over backwards for these initiatives and these people, whether it's Stand Up to Racism, whether it's, the other lefty, organizations and whatever else. And a lot of them will say, refugees welcome, they're asylum seekers, they're this, they're that. And you hit on something there, which I don't know if people, may not know who you are, may not know your experience, but when you're out in Africa, one of the big things of your speech, which is one of the ones I did watch, was that, you were saying, what a genuine refugee, somebody who's genuinely going without and needs help, look like. What are the biggest things which you see from how it's different in the UK? And again, I think this might be quite, relatively simple question to answer, but a lot of people very indoctrinated into this propaganda.
It's
how
worth
different?
Talking about, absolutely.
How different was it for you out there with that experience? What you noticed out there, and how it's manifesting over here, and the big con that's basically taking place.
Yeah. Okay. So we lived in Burundi. It's right on the border with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and that whole region. And I mean, Africa's almost always in some state of war. Do you know what I mean? Like for instance, right now the Congo, northeast Congo, there's a lot of war going on between Rwanda and the Congo and Sudan, and there's a lot of conflict going on there, and then between Eritrea and Somalia. It's a very it's like the Wild West, but it's not like the Wild West. It's its own unique thing. My experience of it was witnessing refugee camps, right? So these people that are fleeing from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where they were called rebels or whatever. We'd probably call them terrorists today. I don't know the end of it, but there's a lot of bad actors over there. What you saw in the refugees was women, and you saw children. Those are the people that flee war. That's what a refugee camp is. Really, I mean, there may be like some men there, but it's refuge. It's women, children, families. You're not really got these like 20-something-year-old men that are in incredible nick. Like the lads you see, and they're lads. They're just like they're opportunist lads. And one thing that they are as well is they're way richer than any of these people that are actually refugees. For instance, the people that are actually fleeing war, they can't afford the thousands of pounds that you need to pay people to traffic you all the way through Africa, through Europe, and into the UK. Like that is thousands and thousands of pounds worth of trafficking. The average salary in Burundi is $200 a year. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's not even your average African person. You've got these like, they're practically like African Arab like nepo babies. Basically, I don't know how they got their money, but likely not through legitimate means. And they are well off people that are making and you speak to them like they're like, yeah, I put some we raised some money. We put some money aside so that we could come here and we could get a better life for ourselves. They're not really like, they're not real refugees. It's weird. So I mean, it seems like an obvious thing to say, but they're not real refugees at all. The whole thing's a huge scam. The people that are being brought here are scamming us, and the people that are allowing the system to continue are also scamming us. And the average person of this nation has to fight tooth and nail for every pound that they have, of which the government takes 50 pence. But these opportunists get everything for free. They're not real refugees, man. I don't know. What have you seen of them? Any of them near you? No.
Not that I know of yet. And this is the biggest thing. When I see it, the videos, like one of the biggest ones was the hotel in Canary Wharf, and there were so many people there that were videoing it, and you saw the buses turning up, and it was very, very easy to see. The place where I reside at the moment is literally just basically one long terraced street, is the entire town. But there is actually one thing which does make me very suspicious. There's this one, I don't know whether it might be called like a HMO or whatever it is, but it's not signposted or anything like that. And it's just, whenever I'm walking the dog, it's just little things I'm seeing that, like, just things that look quite suspicious to me. And I'm just like, I can't find anything about this place online or anything like that. And obviously it's in the arse end of the valleys. It's not exactly the most common thing to come up on Google. So I'm trying to find more out. But the Welsh government in particular, I've noticed, is very, very secretive, or tries to be very secretive about this stuff. Obviously the Home Office and in England, the thing is they've got so much of a scale of a problem over there, it's almost impossible not to see it. But I definitely, and it's the thing, even people who'd like disagree with me on this stuff, disagree with me for even talking about it when I have arguments with people, when I talk to them, then like they notice it and they see it. You know, we were talking about this kind of stuff, and they'll say something like, I've just noticed a bunch of new people down there who I never saw before. You know, so they know
into your community,
they notice it, but then again with the browbeating and with the labels and the character assassination and all of this stuff, and the fact that it was, you know, through public school, it was drilled into you, you know, beaten into you, all of these initiatives. It tells you a lot when in history, for example, in secondary school, they didn't teach you anything about Russia. But the Russian history that we got ended right after the Bolsheviks took power in 1917. Nothing
That's
afterwards.
a good point. That's a great point, yeah.
I always thought about that. I was like, I wonder why. They'll teach you everything about, and again, for anybody who's watching, not endorsing the ideology or anything like that, but they'll teach you all about Nazi Germany all the way up through 1945, when eventually, obviously, the war in Europe ended. But they won't teach you anything about the Soviet Union. They won't teach you anything about Mao's China or anything like that. They won't teach you about any of that.
Or any of those
Pol Pot, exactly. Yeah. And it was all done with political bent, because that's what happens when you give your kids to the government for 7 to 8 hours a day. And again, you mentioned the breakdown of the family structure, men and women being put against each other and all of this stuff. And the sad thing is, when I think about with my mum and dad and parents and everything like that, they went through it as well. So you can't exactly been, you know, angry at them or anything like that. But it's exactly as you said, it's a very lucrative trade. You know, this, people smuggling or human trafficking, whatever term you want to put on it, regardless of the atrocities that also take place on these things, you know, especially with children, as you mentioned, Tom Homan, when he's in America talking about the children that he's had to, you know, go and talk to about their horrific experiences with the cartels and the smugglers when they're smuggling them across the border. And if people don't realize then how much the open border is actually contributing and enabling the smuggling and is creating a market for this kind of stuff. And then, you know, they do it under the guise of empathy. But again, they're promoting ideologies that get more and more children harmed, and more people harmed as people come into this, you know, country illegally. And we saw it in Epping. That's obviously the reason why they had the flash protest after I think it was a 14-year-old girl. I think it was a 14-year-old girl was you know, horrifically assaulted.
The protesters are getting longer jail sentences than the actual child rapist. And that's the country that we currently live in. The people that are responsible for that miscarriage of justice will be held accountable in due time. But it's worth recognizing that's where we are, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And you only got to think then, what really gets me is when I say that to people, then I look at look, what's going on up in all of these areas in England, Scotland, etc. And then they go, oh, well, that's up there. That's not here. I'm not worried about that stuff. But I'm like, it's, come on, see, it's on the horizon.
Horrible.
If it's not already here and we can't actually see it, if it's going on and we just don't know, that's bad enough. But if it is coming and you don't do anything about it, you choose to put your head in the sand, that's, equally as destructive and in many ways traitorous as well.
I was reading a book recently, The Nature Principle, and he was talking about how, I just thought it was a really interesting dynamic. He was talking about how people, it's like this attachment theory where essentially people don't want to give any credence to nature and or not give credence to nature, but they don't want to embrace nature because they know it's been destroyed so much around them that it would hurt them too much to accept the reality of how bad things are. That's majorly misquoting what he said, but that sort of attachment theory, I think, is very similar to a lot of the people that you may know, your parents, your family, whatever, who, like you say, were raised in the exact same programming that you were. And they can see before their eyes in the cities, Birmingham, Bradford, London, all these different places, they can see the massively damaging effects of this demographic change. But it's a combination of they're so heavily programmed, and also there's the fear dynamic as well. But on top of that, it would be too much for a lot of these people to accept the reality of how bad things really are. And when you say like, oh, what does it matter to me? Like that to me is one of the biggest arguments that we have, where it's like, not like we have, but like one of the biggest, strongest arguments that we have against people who say, oh, what does it matter? Well, it's not happening here. Well, it should matter to you that someone in Birmingham, an old lady in Birmingham, can't go outside because she's afraid, because she's surrounded by foreign people that hate her and are trying to intimidate her. That should matter to you. And staying there and saying, oh, it's not happening here isn't enough, because if it can happen in London, if it can happen in Birmingham, in our biggest cities, it can happen in our smallest little towns and hamlets. And something needs to be done. But these people, I don't know, how do you see these? How do you see that you deal with a similar sort of thing? How do you get these people on board,
That is the £1 million question, so to speak. And I was just trying to, again, it is why I continue with like the podcast and political commentary and stuff like that. Just like almost like just keep sharing it, and in many ways you could I don't know, because obviously everything is biased in its own way. People who claim to be unbiased typically have their own biases. In many instances, I have more respect for somebody that outright says their biases.
I'm not objective at all. I'm totally biased, 100% towards white, like native people. That's 100% not objective at all. So that's me.
And the biggest thing is, in many ways, though, one of the things that I came to with regards to the viewpoint is at least saying, well, nobody else is going to look out for us. And why would we expect anybody else to look out for us? Why would we expect anybody else to keep our affairs in order? Because they're both then equally damning on us, as we're not able to keep our own affairs in order. So, not only are we outright, we have to look out for us because, nobody is going to, but then we shouldn't be expecting anybody to. Like, I understand the sentiment of, people saying to, tagging like the vice president or the president on X, say like, buy up the UK or whatever it is. And I get what people are saying, because people are feeling desperate and all of these things. And I think partially they're doing it as a joke, but I'm like, look at what the things that you're not saying with your words, but are being conveyed in the sentiment, being like, wow, you've lost control of your affairs this much. Is this how like bad you are keeping, keeping everything in check? The fact that you need somebody, somebody else or whatever to come and help you. And granted, in many ways that, help between allies, if you will, is appreciated, obviously. But it's like the fact that we've allowed ourselves to become so reliant on other people, like, you know, deindustrialization, you know, now we're reliant on everything coming over from China and all other places that are burning coal like there's no tomorrow. You know, the lovely wind turbines that Ed Miliband loves so much that are built in coal power plants that can't be recycled, that are just chucked in the countryside to rot away and produce all other manner of hazard for the wildlife there after they've served their term. Not to mention the ones that catch on fire, the ones that kill, you know, however many not millions, but however many hundreds of birds every day.
Who knows? Worldwide, it could be millions.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm like, I can't look at the bloody things now, and I just see a giant death windmill across all of my, you know, lovely green and colourful valley, and I'm like, nah, that this is, and it's again emblematic
and
of
energy
the decline.
prices.
Energy prices, exactly. And
only on the up and up. And we're told, oh, renewable. And you just realize, like, hold on a second. Is it making it cheaper or more? How is it possible to make energy more expensive when you say there's an unlimited supply of it? It's free for you, is what, like, how they try and sell it to us. And they literally sell it to us like, oh, our local politician, Stephen Flynn or whatever, he's like, literally comes out of this P&J Live, and he's just been with offshore energy, right? And he's like, comes out there and he's like, I've just been with a meeting with offshore energy, and they seem like really top blokes. And this is his actual, literal, direct quote. We should all work in their best interest at all times. Openly in a video. And I was just like, and I looked at the comments and nobody had mentioned like, hold on a second. Do you know what I mean? Like, hold on a second. That's not what we're supposed to do with our lives. That's not this dynamic. It's not a dynamic of companies up here telling politicians here that the people down here need to serve the companies, like, which is exactly what he just said there. But
Freudian slip.
Massively, but I don't even think he knows that it's a Freudian slip. Like, it's not like he's like, oh, I'm withholding this. He actually thinks that that's how we get ahead. We need to bow down to these corporations and do as they say, instead of corporations serving the people. And that's what you witness, is just you now have the countryside covered in wind turbines, which, yeah, there's an argument for all these different energy sources, but when energy prices are going up exponentially, you have to ask the question, how is this serving the people? And how are they making such a killing while the people are just being absolutely fleeced? You know? Sorry, I kind of went off on one there.
No, it's all right. Because I love that you mentioned there, you know, they're making it bank, and like, you know, people are making it, people don't realize how rich people are. I love it when there's an account I quote posted it and, you know, basically went on a massive rant on it, because I keep saying the same thing over and over again. It's like these asylum seekers you mentioned, obviously they're coming here, they're very well off. And as well, one other thing I mentioned, just quickly going back to that, is that, you know, they're rich enough to pay the human traffickers to get them over here, which is obviously suspicion number one. But not only that, you're willing to, you know, work with traffickers to get to this country. It'd be like, it's another thing about the morals and the character of these people. Should we really not be thinking about that? But again, the thing that the lefties love to say, which is, these people, they get by on like 50 quid or 10 quid a week. I'm like, conveniently leaving out the fact that everything else is paid for them, right? They don't have to pay for mortgage, they have to pay for heat, gas, electric, food, etc. But not only that, they're the ones going on about, you know, fair tax to the rich and all of this stuff. But then conveniently not mentioning the guy is he called the king of asylum hotels? The guy that's called the king of asylum hotels, and he's making millions or hundreds of millions off of these hotels. It's funny, if you never hear them saying they want to massively tax Dale Vince, the ecotricity guy, you know, the green guy. Never hear them saying they want a wealth tax on the politicians that they like and all of these things, right? It's only for the people that they don't like. And again, the conversation about taxation and all of these other things is a you know, wider conversation in and of itself. But you're seeing there, and then these people are like, follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. But I'm like, well, follow your own fucking money. Follow the government subsidies and follow all of this other stuff as well then. And then these are the people that will claim to be, again, energy prices are going up. People are, I think it was in Ireland, the government was trying to push through mandatory purchase orders, I believe it was called, that you basically had to sell your residence or it might have been part of your residence, I can't remember, to the government for them to do whatever the hell they want with. And it's quite easy to see what they're going to do with that. They're trying to force people that should never even be in the country onto people literally in their homes, or many instances take their homes away to do it. It's just like there's this massive system, going on, a very massive, sinister agenda. And you mentioned there again, these people that claim to be for the rich or for the working class. I'd be like, for the poor, against the rich, tax the rich, eat the rich, those kinds of people. But like, you guys left communities like mine behind long ago.
In the dust. Yeah, in the dust. They don't, and that's the thing, like, I think it was George Orwell that said, like, these people don't love the poor, they just hate the rich. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now it's actually to the point where I'm pretty sure they just hate the poor and the rich. And they just hate society as a whole. They're anarchists, whatever. They want to tear down the whole system, and things like that. Like, it's interesting, like you say, about the financial aspect of who's supporting these people. Like, all the papers that are talking about the Aberdeen protests and stuff, they're literally owned by Israeli assets, and they're massively taking, like the Rupert Murdoch's son who runs News Corporation. It makes $8 billion a year, right? And they're taking the side of the pedos for Palestine, we call them, because there's a bunch of very questionable people there who've literally been caught shouting, "We're coming for your children." Like, as far as I'm concerned, you're a pedophile. And if you're going to call me all manner of names or whatever, you're a pedophile. Like, I actually believe that to be the case, so I'm going to say that. But yeah, the papers that support them and are coming after us are the people that they are alleging that they are against. And the people that are funding Stand Up to Racism, the people that are funding Hope Not Hate and all these sorts of degenerate organizations, the people that are funding them are incredibly rich, well-off people that they're pretending that they don't serve, but you do serve them. they serve them, they serve them on the end of a leash. And it was just another point, just before I forget, they talk about actually two things that I'll mention. So you said about, they only get 50 quid a week or whatever, or something like that, or however much money they say. Well, it's like, as far as I'm concerned, if you want to, these people are trying to force their neighbors to pay for other people. Does that make sense? So instead of saying, I like refugees, I'm going to pay a refugee charity this, and this, I'm going to take this out of my pocket, I'm going to take these people into my home. They want to force you and me and our families and everybody else to take these people in, because it's not so much about being nice. It's about, like I say, hating our people and punishing us. And you scratch these people and suddenly they're like, oh, it's about being nice. And then you scratch them and they're like, no, it's because of colonialism. And the tacit admission in there is that, okay, it's because of, so it's a punishment because of, you're getting this because you did this. It's not a good thing. So, like, within the space of a sentence, they'll say it's an amazing thing, it's great, it's whatever. And then suddenly it'll be basically a genocidal notion. You guys are being replaced because you did bad things, or your people did bad things in the past. Second thing I'll say is it's so funny to watch them sitting in front of an actual 4-star hotel with this banner that says, the far right say that these people are put up in luxury hotels. This is nonsense. And I was just like, you're standing in front of a 4-star hotel, So I don't know, man, this is ridiculous, isn't it?
The evidence is literally in the background.
Yeah, if you just turn around.
And then odds are you got these people inside, they're probably doing some heinous thing out the window to the people taking the photos and the protesters, the quote unquote far right, because as we know that term has just been used now to talk about, to label anybody that is even
it's an anti-white slur.
Yeah, and even remotely, conservative, for example, who has any kind of, even just in many ways to the left of centre bent now on some political issues. I saw an account on X the other day. It made me laugh. It was truly hilarious. They were labeling Labour as right wing. That's how some of these
think that.
That's how some of these people think. And, and as you mentioned, they use terms like far right, fascist, Nazi, all of this stuff, not because it's accurate, because in many ways they want to justify getting rid of you. And if because if you are, in theory, I think it's what most people would say, is that if you were facing a political threat which wanted to not relinquish the reins of power in a democratic fashion, wanted to take over in this massive way and institute this, completely anti-democratic, tyrannical system, which in many ways pretty much what we're seeing at the moment anyway, it's just on the communist end. The logical point really would be, to pick up arms and go and deal with the threat, because this is seemingly a threat to your very existence. That's where most people would be, and that's where they use these terms deliberately, not because it's accurate. And in many ways, then, for people who would be who may not agree politically with those people and would be concerned about the rise of really, really right wing figures, I'd be like, well, all you've done is you've given the people you're supposedly against in the most extreme, so the people who are very, very right wing, for example, you've given them the perfect cover. This is where people not even be able to see, beyond the end of their nose sometimes. It's like, by saying this, by labeling everybody as far right or Nazi or whatever, for the actual people that do support that ideology within it, you've basically given them the perfect cover. You know what I mean? You've given them a treat.
I'd say, I'd say it's intentional, removing, it's essentially like it's a tactic to remove the moderates, to remove the moderate position as a whole, to try and force people into this situation where all you can do is be violent, basically. If they take away your speech, if they take away all these different things, they're trying to force you in a situation where it's either like you can either just take what you're given, or you can go out and do something about it. It's at least what they're trying to do. I don't think it's necessary, to be violent in any way. We have a right to defend ourselves, absolutely, but at the same time, we shouldn't be attempting to, overtly try and be violent unless it's absolutely necessary in self-defense.
Yes, agreed.
But definitely, mate, they're trying to remove the whole. They're trying to remove the sane minds and make sure that. Make sure you've only got the radicals there, because that's easier for them to deal with. Then, they don't have to actually address the points of the problems. I think it's in some ways kind of a form of procrastination. Like the number one issues for the nation should be a checklist for the government, but the government doesn't do any of the things on that checklist. I know it's not, procrastination isn't the issue. Isn't the deeper issue, but I don't know. It's an aspect maybe.
Yeah, fair, because the government, the one thing with regards to the agendas it wants to push through, it hasn't procrastinated one bit. You know what I mean? It's been, like I wanted to change an address the other day, and the online service, it wanted to take me through to that. I think it's the Gov UK One login or something. Right. The one login system. And I'm like, no, I don't like this, because I see what they're doing with digital ID. I see how they're trying to bring all this in. I'm like, so I'm literally, after we finish now, going to go get a form from a post office, going back to doing things the old-fashioned way, as its own kind of rebellion. But especially with the Labour government, especially, it seems as though they were doing everything the Conservatives were doing. And I like the meme. It's just this: it's faster, harder, and without lube is the way that they're doing it. They're pushing through
things through. Yeah,
they're pushing through all of the same agendas, just so much faster and so much more forcefully. With an iron fist. And in many ways, I dread to think what the 2029 landscape is gonna look like. Either the Politburo might have collapsed by then under the weight of its own corruption and degeneracy. I don't know, because I don't really see reform, at least on the national scale, as being really any much different, if anything. I think they've even taken not only Conservative defectors but Labour defector. I think they took one Labour defector in, which was very, very concerning. And I think that's why when people are seeing this, you mentioned this, it's like they're trying to put people in this situation where it's like you either take what you're given or you have to resort to other means to get yourself out of it. It's like, again, an animal being backed into a corner. You back a dog into a corner, and you give it no a route of escape, even in a way that's not going to result in some kind of conflict. It only has one option left for its survival, right? And I think that's what you're seeing now with protests, with outside of these hotels, with demonstrations, with raising the colours, all of these, flag raisings and so on, is that people are realising they're being pushed into this corner and they have nothing left to do. Yeah. Especially when it was only a month ago that a guy got shot for having conversations at a table in America. You know what I mean? They shot the moderate.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a big. I think it was radicalizing moments every single week, really. But there was the Irina Zarutska murder where somebody, a white girl, was murdered for being white, and all these people that are refugees welcome here were absolutely silent for that girl who was a refugee. Why? Because she was white, and that's the deeper story. Do you know what I mean? You can tell the deeper intentions and stories of these people by what they say and what they don't say. You know what I mean? It's as loud, they are as loud sometimes when they don't speak, and that was one of those instances. And you're right. They shot the moderate position. They got him. It's crazy what they did to that bloke, man. He's a father and a brother and a son. But yeah, so we're in a position now where they want us to just flip out and just kind of chimp out and do a bunch of irrational things. I think we're in a very unique position now where everybody's waking up to what's going on. They're waking up to the fact that we've tried democracy. We've tried, messaging, or sorry, not messaging, like sending letters to our local MP. We've tried all these, we tried voting. We've tried sitting down and being quiet. We've tried everything that they've said to us to do. Just accept this, accept that. Everybody's done it to a degree. Everybody's sat and accepted what's been pushed towards us. And we're getting to a point now where I think people are realizing it's not working. Sitting down and waiting for this to blow over is not working. We're going to be a minority in this country in 2050. Children being born now are already a minority in this country. Birmingham, Bradford, all these different cities. And what's happening to the nation is not going away. It's getting worse, and it's a crisis every single day. Yep. And I think people are just realizing, we don't need to live like this. We've had our compassion taken advantage of. We don't need to live like this at all. Everybody that we've brought into this nation, or has been brought into this nation against the will of the people, has an illegitimate claim to their stake in this land, because we never agreed to it. We were never asked. And we have a right to a homeland. So simple as that, man. I mean, that's what my whole push really is, to try and get people to come together as a community, because we can come together as communities. All these social media, everything, just stop. Just go outside and speak to your local people. And that's the only way we can start building the real networks that we need to change this stuff, I don't know what you think about it. Let me know what you think about that. I'm interested to hear, because...
No, the one thing I've noticed, particularly with you guys, and I spoke with, obviously, Josh Fernie a couple of months ago, and he mentioned the focus was on community politics and stuff like that, and it certainly is having a massive effect when they're seeing these people who the media tells people they, all of these horrible things, Nazis, neo-Nazis, whatever, all of these other labels they want to use. And then they're going out, Callum Barker at the moment in England, they building some kind of pool for a young girl in their community who I believe is physically disabled in some way. So it's like I
think it's a therapy pool, isn't it?
To aid her, therapy pool. It's showing him, carrying the banners, carrying the signs home afterwards when you see the Stand Up to Racism protests, because they don't care. It's not a grassroots thing. It's not a thing that people actually genuinely believe in. They leave the placards. They leave the placards all over the place. There's litter everywhere. They leave it like an absolute dumpster fire war zone, whereas they see these actual people, again, who they've been told these disgusting, evil people, but they're cleaning up after their communities. They're trimming branches away from overgrown, footpaths, so that, the council, they're not doing anything seemingly, because they a lot of the time seemingly with your local politicians and with your MPs, whatever, it's just the cash fat checks, it seems. They're not doing anything. And then it's people taking matters into their own hands, but doing it in a way that's actually benefiting their community. And I do think that resonates with people a lot, because one of the things which people see, particularly with me and like with, my political representation and so on, it seems as that the current political representatives we have, they're not seen anywhere that it would matter unless there's some kind of photo op, unless there's some kind of ways to, promote it or whatever. At least that's the way that it seems to me. In a way that I think it seems to a lot of other people as well. So then when they see people, they don't care whether the cameras are on or off, going into their local communities, talking with people, making the individuals' lives better within their communities. And I think that really, really does resonate with people a lot. Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. Callum has for years literally just been grafting the community, litter picking, helping the elderly, just being a good bloke. And you look at him and he's just like, he's a great guy. Callum is a great guy. And I think that foundation of what Callum had, the name for himself that he'd built in his local community, he's the bloke that goes around and helps people and does litter picks and cares about his local community. That foundation is why they had so much success in Epping. And I know it's hard to quantify the success, but the movement that was Epping and how it affected the whole nation, how that sparked off the whole nation, very organic. And right at the center of that is Callum Barker. And literally, I hate using the word literally, but the work he put in, that's the foundation, right? But you can't just have community politics. You can't just have, I'm going to go plant trees or whatever. It has to align with political movements. You have to contest the enemy. You have to contest our competitors. You've got to beat them to the punch. And that's what you saw in Epping was Callum beating Reform, beating Conservatives, beating everyone to the punch, right? And it was him. It was just him. And he didn't need anybody. It's just Callum. You know what I mean? And he's political savvy, knows everything you need to know about these things. And suddenly you have Reform trying to come in. Suddenly you have the Conservatives is the worst, really. Because
like
at least Reform
circling, they're circling like vultures, you know what I mean?
At least, exactly. At least Reform can pretend, or not even pretend, but at least they can say, "Oh, in the future we'll deal with this," or whatever. That But the Conservatives, man, I remember doing a speech, and everyone hates them so much. Like the Tories, either side of the aisle, and they try and come there, and you can see them. They're sheepish. They're like, will people accept me talking the absolute tat that I'm about to talk in complete hypocrisy? How I stood there for years and allowed this to happen, and I'm not addressing that fact. How I openly voted for the Boris wave. For instance, and that's one bloke in Reform, right? I forget his name. He used to be Conservative. He's quite heavy set. Todd.
Maybe see if Anderson, I can find an image of the guy that you're on about. Anderson?
Yes, yeah. So he was talking about mass immigration or whatever. I just looked on his voting record, which is publicly available. He voted for the Boris wave. He voted for the millions of people, non-EU immigration that comes in every year. He voted for that. But then, not to get too far away from the point, but what happened in Epping is an excellent example of beating your competitors and the enemy to the punch. And if you can do that, if I can do that, if everyone around the country can do that and start beating these politicians and the people that can inflict power to the punch and not letting them get their foothold in, we get our foothold in first, and they have to come and beg us for the crumbs. That's a semblance of the starting of a strategy, right? Where you can start to inflict some real change,
And it's a massive mountain to climb, and not to mention the battles that are going on as well. But it's quite literally, you don't climb a mountain without getting a foothold first. You don't climb up a big rock surface without getting a foothold first. And it's exactly where you're saying. exactly with Callum, it's almost like the protests in Epping, they just flew up kind of organically because people, again, they can see what's going on, right? They can see that the government's not doing anything about it. Exactly as you said, you don't need to try and make the case that the Conservatives are going to be accepted, especially in an area like mine. You know, you say Conservative, instantly it brings up memories of like Iron Lady Thatcher and the miners and so on, right?
I doubt there's many votes in your area for the for the Tories.
No, and that's what I think. Yeah, especially, you know, I mean, I think people often use the term conservative in value, not necessarily conservative in party name, conservative in values, being like British society or Scottish society, English society, Welsh society. It has things worth conserving about it. And that's where the biggest thing is, where the nationalist sentiment comes from, is where then they can see that it's being given away to people who you mentioned, essentially even got here, you know, not even 5 minutes ago, not even a couple of days ago, simply because our politicians want a voting bloc because of the goodwill, because of the things which they've eliminated with the people that they were supposedly serving, because they betrayed them at every single turn. I think that's where, again, you see with the Conservatives, it's almost like they have more vitriol and hatred for the Conservatives because they come in as supposedly going to solve these problems, and they made them worse at every turn. Whereas I think most people would say they knew what to expect with a party like Labour, for example, on these issues. They knew what to expect. But with the Conservatives, you'd hope that they were there to actually solve the problems, and it's quite clear that they weren't. What's the situation like up in, because obviously it was a little while ago I spoke to Josh, it was a good couple of months ago. What's the scene been like up in Scotland in particular? Because I know he's saying that there was quite a few problems going on up there, and obviously you've been speaking at your protests and so on. What's the scale of the problem like up there, if you don't mind me asking?
So I'll try and recount some of the things I've been told. So I've talked to 3 individual people who, and this was just, I'm talking about this, I don't get much FaceTime necessarily, like I've got to be preparing stuff, but at these protests, talked to 3 individual people on one day who had their children or grandchildren lured into the hotel that we were protesting outside of. Another example of an 8-year-old and 11-year-old who have had a predatory migrant indecently expose himself to these children, 8-year-old, 11-year-old, and the woman has reported it to the police, and these other instances have been reported to the police, and they just say, there's nothing we can do, you know? Well, nothing really happened, you know, and can you identify these people? And, you know, I mean, they do everything in their power to try and push these things under the rug because they don't want to cause a problem, you know. They wouldn't want people to actually know what's going on here. And I think chronologically it started with people. There was 3 migrant hotels here. It started by the black and minority ethnic group posting a warning to the people on their page saying, be careful. When you go down the beach, you know, in the area where the migrant hotel was, be careful, don't go alone, women don't go alone. And that got out. And then everybody was aware of the hotel being there. And then you had a 75-year-old woman being sexually assaulted by one of these migrants. You had these children being targeted. You had children being indecently exposed to, and just generally the atmosphere that you get from these unwanted visitors is one of hate and disgust. They hate us. They are taking advantage of us. They will spit on the street in front of you. The city, the face of the city is changing. The face of the city is becoming strange and dangerous. And it's happening in Aberdeen. It's now to the point where now I have 6 different locations that we're being at least told about. 6 different locations that we're being told about in this city. And they're doubling the amount of people that are here, to the point where it's like almost 1 in 100 people are here. Literally just by on other people's ticket, on the taxpayer's ticket. You know, foreign invaders here on the taxpayer ticket. Almost 1 in 100. Think about, like, I don't think people really understand the ramifications of 1 in 100 people being brought in, like the delicate balance that we have in society and how that has transformed things. And to summarize, mate, it's horrible what's happening. The city is it's like a rapid Birminghamification of the city, right? Whether it's illegal or legal, the changing face of this city is it's horrible, man. It's horrible to be around, because we want to be around our own people, really. You know, the vast majority of people have that in-group preference. What's happening here is disgusting. And I'll talk in a minute about some of the ways that police and the courts have been acting as well. But that gives you an overview of how it is here, unfortunately.
And yeah, it's exactly as you mentioned. It's like, I try to tell people, look at London, look at Birmingham, look at even, I don't know, maybe slightly smaller areas, towns like Luton and places like that, and understand that that is what they pretty much want everywhere, because they see the people coming in, they see the rest of the world at this point as an extremely large voting bloc, and they can get rid of any right to say what you want and any right that you have to object to it very easily, simply by bringing those people here. And I always say, exactly as you mentioned, we potentially get on track to be a minority in 2050, or potentially, depending on how much they ramp it up, even sooner, potentially, by some estimates. And that's right. I don't think people really realize what that means for us, is that we have nowhere else to go. Obviously, a lot of these people, they have obviously different places they can go back to and whatever else. But there's been such a push for minority rights and all of this stuff under the guise of just giving more and more privileges to, well, for lack of a better term, foreigners. It's just giving more and more privileges to foreigners over the native people. What people don't realize is that the minute we become a minority and we have no say anymore, that's basically the equivalent of having no rights whatsoever, because we've surrendered our ability to change those things in any democratic fashion. At that point, it would be, because I think I'd done a video talking about a story from one of the survivors of the Yazidi genocide from 2014. She was taken as a Sabia by ISIS when her village was taken over. Because the Yazidis were a massive minority in the area, and they had no capacity to obviously there was more of an armed takeover of their community. But I'm like, we're going to go the same way of global minorities around the world if this continues.
Rhodesia.
Yeah, Rhodesia is another great example. Absolutely. And what really shocked me about this the other day was apparently, again, Wales, at least according to the most recent census, is very ethnically homogenous, it seems. That's why I'm not sure if it's a case of Wales doesn't have the same kind of problems yet, or that it's the government is not reporting it as well, or whatever. I'm not 100% sure. But you're already starting to see some of these problems. And there's more, according to one of the things I saw on X the other day. Apparently, there's more simply just Muslims within the UK than there are entirety of Welsh people, or entirety of people living in Wales. And I say people living in Wales because not everybody living in Wales is a Welsh person in their ancestry. And that to me is a terrifying stat. You mentioned about being radicalized. I was like, oh, that's radicalizing.
Yeah. No, it's horrible to think that, it's just... to think that there are the Welsh people are now not even as big as Islam is in this nation. It's a horrible thing to contend with, to be honest, man, because there's plenty of places around the world where these people can live and have a homeland, but this is our homeland. And it's being taken from us, man. And I saw that as well. More Muslims than Welsh. And that's, people don't, it's like that disconnect that people have where they're like, oh yeah, we'll bring these people in, It's like, no, you're going to have a point now where, you think of Britain, you think of the Scottish, the English, the Welsh, Northern Irish, or depending, maybe the Irish, depending on if you're, what type of Northern Irish person you are. But yeah, it's just nobody thinks of any of these people as actually from here. They're not our people, but they're an enclave. We've been sold this myth of assimilation. Oh, they'll assimilate. Oh, we can pick and choose, and as long as they come here and do this and they do that, but it never happens, man. And it's sad, because our children will grow up in a country where we won't be surrounded by our own people. We'll be surrounded by foreign people. You know what I mean? And most of us don't want that, and that's the reality of this situation, is that we think of our nation as our home, and the vast majority of us want to decide who comes in and goes out of this nation. And the vast majority of us, further still, wants to be in a nation surrounded by our own people. And when we say we don't want these people here because of X, Y, Z, it's not safe, it's bad for culture, blah, 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 blah. For the other person in the house, for these stand up to racism types that are being paid to support these sort of degenerate things, for them to say, no, you have to let that person into the house, that is just a basic lack of understanding of consent. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if you think that's like a reasonable way to frame it, but it's a basic consent, and these people don't understand consent, and that's the whole problem. We never consented. We were never asked. We don't want it, and we want what has happened to us reversed. Sorry to take like a political, like
no,
a political, like what do you call political like line?
Soapbox?
Yeah.
Getting up on your soapbox kind of thing. But no, it's as you mentioned, it's exactly as you mentioned, where again it's a complete misunderstanding and a dereliction of consent. And these are the same types of people then will tout the line, believe all women and all of these things. Yeah. Unless, I don't know if you saw, if you haven't seen it, I might have to send you this clip. It's truly hilarious. It's the leftist streamer in America, Welsh, the communist Welsh. I'm not sure if you know who that is, but there's 3 women on this show that he's watching. He's on his stream watching the show, right? And the subject of it is these women, I believe, have either been raped or sexually assaulted. I can't remember if this was an American woman or if it was somewhere else, but basically the sentiment was he went on this massive, minute-long speech about, about rape culture and how bad the West is for rape culture and so on, all of these things, how degenerate people are. And then the minute she made it known that it was because this person was of a certain race and a certain religion that the police weren't going to do anything, switched like that and was saying, what, you're going to use your rape story to go on about the rape refugees? And it's you're seeing the tolerant left turn, for lack of a better term, it's a very old expression, and a lot of people elsewhere in the world, if they happen to be watching this, might not know this term, but turn on a sixpence is what my dad would say. Absolutely turn on a dime, and all of a sudden then, because it doesn't fit the political agenda, that the believe all women stuff goes out the window.
Yeah, it's horrible. These people are horrible, man. That's a horrible thing
they try to claim empathy. Somebody let me know the other day that the unions and stuff like that, I think, are another massive problem pushing through this hard leftist agenda. Somebody messaged me the other day, and one of the things in their message was that within these union groups, they're circulating like Antifa level posters and propaganda and all of this stuff, and you're realizing how deep in the shit we are when everything is state run and everything is, well, damn near everything is state run and unionized and everything. You're realizing, oh shit.
I'll give you an example, man. Yeah.
Oh, go on, please.
The protest around here, one of the pedos, he is called, right? He's paid by UNISON to come organize those protests. He is the one that was chanting, "We're coming for your children." The UNISON, if you're watching this and you pay UNISON union fees, that's what you're funding. And I ask you the question, have your wages risen in alignment with inflation, or have they stagnated massively while these people are being paid to say completely degenerate, pedophilic things in public? You're funding that and you're not getting any upside from it. Maybe consider not funding that, But that's just, sorry to interrupt, but I just thought I'd give you an example.
No, that's no problem. I appreciate that. For those of you who might not be, maybe outside of the UK, I've had people comment from New Zealand, I've had people comment from the States and so on. UNISON, in this instance, I believe, is the largest union in the entire country. So the largest union in the country is, at least by this admission, funding this and contributing to this. And there's so many unions because they're dominated by these, hard left, Antifa and troon types, if you will, for lack of a better term, that they try to get across that they're super empathetic and all of these things, but they instead of having the communist red, they're communist rainbow. You know what I mean? That's basically what is going on.
Yeah.
I believe there's one other thing that I wanted to mention, because there's another topic you've been quite vocal on, and it's something which I've opened my perspective on. I think I talked about with Josh Fernie at the time for more pragmatic reasons than any political, because I've seen a lot of things about this particular area of the world that makes me very skeptical of them from a political standpoint. I think that the state that they have, the area that they have, particularly for the preservation of Christian holy sites, aside from the one church they hit in Gaza, it seems, it is, a relatively good thing, purely from a pragmatic perspective. But you've been quite vocal, and wanted to get your perspective on this, on Israel and the conflict in the Middle East and stuff like that, particularly with something known, I believe a lot of people have spoken about this. And if our government hadn't facilitated industrial scale child rape in the name of all of these things and betrayed people at every single turn, I might have been a lot more skeptical of this. But something known as the Hannibal Directive, it was known with regards to October the 7th and stuff like that. Yeah. Do you mind elaborating on that a little bit? This is just purely for my own interest now, because like I said, I think I mentioned in my initial outreach message that my perspective has sort of began to shift a little bit, particularly with regards to how evil governments can be, what seems to be a wider agenda going on at play.
Yeah. Okay, so I suppose the context would be that you have Israel and Palestine, right? It's a sort of fractured. If you look at it on a map, I wonder. I don't know. I could maybe draw it. Have we got any pens around here? In fact, no. Sorry, I don't have any pen. But basically,
sorry, if only I could pass one. I got one right here. If I could pass it through the screen, that'd be nice.
Yeah, thank you. Hold on.
Elon, get on that. Elon, get on that wormhole pass pen through the screen technology. Come on.
Yeah. Hold on. Okay, it doesn't massively matter, I suppose. You've got sort of what used to be Palestine, which is mostly Israel now. There's no getting around that. They've encroached since they've been a nation since 47, 48, I want to say. Okay, so bottom left strip, you have the Gaza Strip, right? It's fairly thin, and yeah, that's certainly shrinking now. It would be better if I could show it on a map, but that is a region where Israel has a border all around that strip, right? And then I think maybe the southwestern part of that actually borders onto Egypt. I'm not sure if that's the case. I'm not sure if that's the case anymore.
The Rafah crossing, I think it is, isn't it? By Rafah, right. I think is where it borders, I think.
Yeah, I believe that's for quite a while been border with Egypt. I think now Israel has cut that off. I've not, to be honest, I've not been too clued in it for quite a little while. What we can say about October 7th, however, is that, okay, that whole border, from a military perspective, they're a westernized military, the Israeli military. They have all the same legal parameters that we have. To have that border secured is a legal requirement. So it is something that they will have had that border secured at all times. There's no such thing as okay, lads, just stay back and we're not going to do patrols today. Lads, just stay back and we're not going to man the border. That is not something that would ever happen. Think about where I used to work, right? We have a certain number of people on a 5-minute notice to effect. Okay, within 5 minutes, so at any one time, legally required, you need to have enough people to be able to have this effect. Same thing in Gaza, right? But you witness this story, and I encourage anybody to go listen to the story of this Israeli IDF soldier who was on the border, who understands this whole context of, we don't just leave the border free. That's not something we would ever do. Excuse me. And so he tells the story of how on the morning of October 7th, in direct alignment with the attack that happened on October 7th, that they were told to stand down. Now, understanding the context, you understand that doesn't happen. There's no such thing as leaving open flanks. There's no such thing as lads just take the day off. It doesn't happen. It has to be locked in. And so he, after a while, he witnessed what happened and very quickly drew his conclusion, which was that, I mean, you can see him struggling with it, to be honest, mate. You can see him struggling with it, where it's like he's on the news and there's a lot of factors involved in what this bloke is saying. Because on one side, he has just witnessed the intelligence community in his nation, Mossad, feed the chain of command that he, would have held in high regard or whatever, information to say, okay, you need to stand down between this time and this time.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately in that time witnessed an attack on his people by Hamas. Mm-hmm. And his mate, he will have seen his mates die and stuff like that. And he's obviously coming to the conclusion that they've orchestrated this. This is something that has been allowed to happen, or maybe not orchestrated, but allowed to happen. Have my mates seriously been sacrificed for more or less a false flag attack? And this is where you can see he's thinking and how he's battling with this. To fulfill political aims, to say, okay, well, we'll let this happen, and that way we can take back Gaza and we can, work towards our greater Israel plans or whatever. You can see him contending with the fact that he can sort of see that right in front of his face. But he also has to contend with the fact that, he knows that if he says that, he'll be cast out as a traitor. It's just, I don't know. I can't speak to how much this bloke and the blokes that were giving their accounts, I can't imagine how that feels to know that that's happening. We're kind of getting in a tangent into this individual guy, but what happened was these people were told to stand down, and there was a huge amount of the people on that border that were killed. And it was a huge atrocity on the news and everything like that. And to be honest, mate, at the very time that it came out, I was just thinking, that sounds mental to me. So you're telling me the IDF just took a day off and somehow didn't know that Hamas was going to do this? And that all sounds kind of like, when you don't understand the perspective of, or not necessarily if you don't understand, but I don't want to sound like condescending, but these people are capable of great evil. They shared a border with ISIS for many years. Incidentally, ISIS never attacked Israel, and Israel never attacked ISIS. The same with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or al-Nusra as they used to be called. And in the context, when you realize and you hear Benjamin Netanyahu say things like, we need Hamas. We need Hamas. We need them to be extreme. The more extreme they are, the more justification we have to go into these regions. He doesn't say that last bit exactly, but there is a huge incentive.
He was caught on a camera in a private setting, wasn't he? There was a video of him being caught on a camera in a private setting.
Yeah, I think that's the one I've seen. And and on multiple occasions, these people are going online saying, "Oh, we need another 9/11. We need another 9/11." And this is speaking to the people that are listening to this in nationalist circles and stuff. It's like you see all these weird pedos for Palestine, and you think, whatever they're against, I'm for, So and they're against Israel. So a lot of people are just like, yay, Israel. But you really have to understand that Israel, while we were at war with Argentina, was funding and sending weaponry to Israel. And as a Royal Marine, I know people who watch their brothers die, and Israel shares the blame. So I'm just not a fan of them, man. And to witness how they act and the deception, like Mossad, I would contend I'd be happy to argue with anyone. I think they are potentially the most powerful organization on planet Earth. Mossad, they because of their complete and utter lockdown of the demographics of that organization, and the influence that they have over America, and how that can, even though it's a smaller nation, they can actually leverage their power incredibly well. We talk about it, but kind of speaking tangentially though, mate, but that's more or less an overview of the situation as a whole, and why I think that these Israeli soldiers are telling the truth as to what happened on that day.
And that's one of the things that I realized, which before October the 7th, I didn't initially know too much about the history, back when the British had the mandate, and the sergeant's attack, the sergeant's
Sergeant's affair,
Sergeant's affair, King David Hotel, arming Argentina during the Falklands, and that's when we realized, oh, okay. I don't like what happened to just innocent people, on October the 7th, especially when it's then understanding that they could have potentially been sacrificed by their own government, by their own intelligence agencies. And it's like, that's horrific, because we've seen that in an industrial scale in this country, with our young girls and stuff like that, on the scale of millions. And that would be truly heinous. And then you see things like, again, it seems to be like Netanyahu in particular, who's like, seems to, again, indicating that they kind of need Hamas to fulfill their aims and all of these things. And then, again, you see people, for example, exactly as you said, seeing all of the people saying things like rape is resistance and, pedos for Palestine and all of this other stuff. And then they instinctively, I think I sort of fell into this bracket a little while. I've sort of broadened my, perspective quite a bit since then, having learned a lot more of the history, etc. Instinctively go against that. I'm like, it's good to be against that. It's good to be against the rape is resistance stuff and all of this stuff. But then it's a case of being like, the common phrase, like, is the enemy of my enemy my friend? It's like, maybe not always. Maybe not always. And I think that's why you see a lot of people that. Again, I think the one big thing that we let ourselves down in this country is that we focus so much on those foreign affairs and then forget about what's going on at home. Obviously, I think you saw that.
It's all foreign entanglements. We don't need to.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't need to be involved in that at all.
We're an island on the other side of the world. What do we have to do with it? You know what I mean? But then I certainly see then, where. People make the case for like, well, what's going on in Gaza at the moment, the leveling that's going on in Gaza, and then people fleeing, and they flee to Europe and they flee to Britain and stuff like that. Then people are saying, well, if this war wasn't progressing, or if it, luckily I hope that the peace terms that have recently been agreed, I hope they hold, obviously, because nobody wants to see children get killed. Obviously, nobody wants to see any more of the destruction. I don't think. No. You do see some psychos that going about saying that, I don't care how many children die in Gaza and all of these things.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm like, you got to get to a certain point.
Think about what you're saying,
Yeah, exactly. It's and that's why most people that feel sorry for the children in Gaza as well, for the people that protest against Hamas, for the environment that they're growing up in. It just seems that none of the people in that area have a good outcome. It seems just a regular person in that area, like you and me. And I just can't. I do have a heart for those people, especially the children that get indoctrinated into this from a young age, and they basically used as like child soldiers and fodder and stuff like that. It's truly awful. But then, as you mentioned, or rather, as I was going on to, you have the war going on. They're being displaced. They're being sent over here to Europe and Britain and so on. And our politicians, again, that's why I think we have to hold our politicians to a big thing, to higher standards and to what we need them to do. They're all eager to welcome in these people at the expense of our own. And it's like, oh, hang on, how is this all interlinked? And are people that we are being told are allies actually our allies? But then I think that also doesn't mean necessarily then that the person that they are in conflict with is our enemy. You know what I mean? It just seems as though neither of them, best I say, at least the governments of these areas, neither of them seem to be our friends. And obviously there's a lot of historical grievances that go back, 80, 100 years as well.
I mean, as far as I can see it, man, the Israeli right wing destabilizes Africa and the Middle East, and the Israeli left wing promotes for open borders so that they can be taken in here. And it's like a pincer movement. And we just don't need any of it. Do you know what I mean? We don't need any of that, man. And that's not to say that we take on the Palestinians or whatever. So we don't need them either. We just need our own people. And if you're a person that is passionate about what's happening over there, go and join, Medicine Without Borders or Doctors Without Borders. Go and give money to the Red Cross, but don't force me and my family to take these people in from halfway around the world. We're not responsible for what's happening to them. It's as simple as that. You know what I mean? Like, and yeah, like I don't want to like. I feel like some of these questions I'm like giving like soapbox answers, but that's more or less my thoughts on that one. I have a little more in depth of what I'd like to say about like Gaza and Palestine as a whole, but yeah, it's interesting to hear you change your just look into it more and see come up with different conclusions, I suppose.
Yeah, because I see how dogmatic people get about it, and I see how close-minded people get about it. And I'm like, well, no, the evidence for the strongest viewpoint, the evidence will stand on its own merits of whatever people say, and it's up to people then to make the case for so on. And it seems then is when people start lying on both sides, like so. Again, with the atrocities that were going on in Gaza, there was a video that came up on my X feed, and I believe it was a mother that had her 2 kids in the frame, and they had a donation QR code thing on there, but it was clear that they were using a filter to put these scars on the kids' faces, because then they moved the camera in a certain way and the scars disappeared and transferred over to her face and then came back. And I'm like, when you see things like this, I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, it just damages their own cause, and that's when there's so many lies that are told. Like, it seems that there was a lot of lies told about 9/11. It seems that there was obviously countless lies told about the nature of, or rather cover-ups, lies that were involved in cover-ups of rape gangs and all of these other things that directly stem from things like mass immigration and all of these other things. When those lies are being told, and it's just lie after lie after lie after lie, it makes it so difficult to get to the truth. And I think a lot of people, like me, for example, just want to get to the truth of the matter. And when things get so politicized, it makes it so difficult.
That's when you realize how crazy it is, man, when you just, all you're trying to do is just get to the truth.
Exactly.
And they come after you anyway, But,
exactly. And then you end up seemingly getting it from both sides. The most hardcore on the Israeli supporters will call you an anti-Semite if you even so much as say anything negative about the leadership. I mentioned there, again, Mossad being one of the most premier intelligence agencies all across the world, very feared and respected name, right? And they just drop the ball in this way when you've said from your experience, for example, which is again quite valuable. You've said that there's no good reason for that border not to be staffed adequately.
That's just not a thing. Like, I'm sorry, that's not something that would ever happen unless there was some huge emergency, like whether they were going up north or whatever. I don't know, they had a skeleton crew, but standing down, no.
And again, when we've been told that the threat on then Israel's border is so great, it's threatening the entire state of Israel and every Jew that lives there, obviously, and every Arab that lives within the state of Israel as well, I would imagine. But then you're just gonna stand down.
Yeah. I mean, I would encourage anybody to listen to that bloke and see the pain in his eyes and the conflict of interests that he's like, oh, I can't say anything bad about, my own people. But at the same time, like, oh my God, I've just witnessed this. But, for me, man, I've paid a lot of attention to a lot of conflicts over the years. It's very easy these days with social media, with things like Live UA Map. I don't know if you've ever used that before.
No, I've seen that.
So Live UA Map, I think it's Ukrainian, and it was, it could be accused of, hiding certain stories and things and giving potentially a more pro-Ukrainian look in that war in Ukraine. But it was originally made for like earthquakes and things like that. So people would be able to post pictures and geotag them and say, this happened here, okay? But then it eventually just became about wars. So I started looking at Syria, into the Syrian war, and this was a very radicalizing thing for me when I realized that everything we were being told about the Syria war was complete and utter tat. That these moderate rebels that we were being sold as moderate rebels were actually almost completely non-existent. Even where they were existing as the Free Syrian Army or whatever, they were being propped up by foreign money. And you can see it now where everything I said in the past that people used to challenge me on, you can't challenge me on it anymore because the whole country is now owned by Al-Qaeda. who they used to be called Al Qaeda in Syria. Then they changed their name to Al Nusra. Then they changed their name to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and now they own all of Syria. And just to see that whole thing be you can basically a gunshot can hardly go off in Syria without it being posted on this site. Same thing for Israel though. And what I was for a short period of time just running a sort of like open source and intelligence thing. Like I just wanted to potentially make that like use my understanding of these conflicts to put together a picture of what's going on day to day, minute to minute, and geotag it. And what I saw in Israel and what I saw in Gaza was just horrible. And I know it's like people don't want to say it's a genocide because you just have all these like Greta Thunberg types and nobody wants to be associated with that. But what's happening there every single day it's just a massacre every single day, man. Like they're massacring kids and children and yeah, it's not just a case of like, oh, well, Hamas are hiding behind kids. It's like, nah, man, you guys are flattening. Look at Jabalia in northern Gaza. It's gone. The whole thing is gone, man. Like, and people say, oh, but there's restaurants that are open in Gaza. Yeah, there's some bits in southern Gaza that aren't as heavily affected. People are making their way through this thing, but it's not, it's not left wing to look at like hundreds of pictures a day of these kids being blown up and their limbs everywhere and stuff like that. They're real pictures, and Israel really tries their best to influence social media to post these, like that video of the one that you said with the woman who's got the fake scars and stuff. They will massively blow that out of proportion. When in reality, what's happening every single day, man, is just like, it's brutal, and it's kids and it's women, and it's like, I don't care who people think I'm getting lumped in with. It's not good. Do you know what I mean?
I get that. From your experience as well, you mentioned that there's obviously a lot of humanitarian zones in Gaza and stuff like that. If you were to look at these, let me take my throat a minute. Look at these like humanitarian zones and stuff like that. If you were to look at these areas, would you then perceive them based on how you saw like your experiences in Africa and those kinds of things? Are these like genuine people who really need the help in these areas, or some people will accuse them of being like a front for, so like as you mentioned, like a front for weapons and so on. What's your perspective of like these humanitarian zones of when like I think there was one a good while ago. I think I saw it on Piers Morgan's show. That apparently there was like either a cache of ammunition or a cache of weapons there, that because there was an explosion nearby, the weapons or the ammunition went up as well, and that was actually inside the humanitarian zone. What's your perspective on those in particular, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, it's like, I'm not here to paint a picture like the Palestinians or some like. I'm not here to paint. Well, first of all, not here to paint a picture of war like the way it's painted in films, where it's just like you got the goodies and you got the baddies, and the goodies who just like who ascribe to every single charter of the Geneva Convention, and then the baddies who just do everything wrong. You know what I mean? Like, definitely, if I was in Palestine right now and what was happening to me, like, I suppose I would try and avoid having my munitions sent through food. But at the same time, if that's the only thing that's coming in, do you know what I mean? But like, I think, you're in a tricky situation, but I'm definitely not here to be like, oh, that doesn't happen. They don't hide behind this. They don't do that. I just think it's massively blown out of proportion. And that like, just because there's a weapons munition somewhere near a United Nations tent doesn't mean you just go and absolutely eviscerate a United Nations tent with like 50 innocent civilians in it. It's like, if we did that, man, everybody would be like, oh, that's crazy. I can't believe you just did that. I can't believe you just deleted 50 people for, a munitions thing. Like, we would be held to a higher standard, but Israel seems to have this special privilege to just do whatever the hell they want. So yeah, no, I don't think it's like, I'm not painting a picture of like good guy, bad guy. I am painting a picture probably of like one side that is a lot more victimized than the other, though.
Yeah, exactly what you say. That those who then say, kids are not getting killed, or there's not horrendous tragedies that are happening as a result, exactly as you said, of bombs falling and so on, kids losing their limbs and stuff like that. And it's just then, when everything gets so propagandized, isn't it? When everything gets so propagandized and there's so many different things circulating around. And I think the biggest thing that, obviously people here would agree on, however, is that our people, when they get so caught up in these things, like if it is, if there's things are going on, atrocities going on, call it out. And if you, exactly as you mentioned, if you do feel that passionate about it, then, go there, sign up with one of these humanitarian organizations and stuff like that. And if you can make a difference and help people, then that's great showing of humanity. But there's a different thing then when people get so caught up on things that are going elsewhere in the world, when is that, as we talked about before, our own home, the only home that we have, right, it is under invasion every single day, and nothing's being done about it. It's being it's being facilitated and quickened every single day. Is there anything you'd like to close out with, John? And also, obviously, you can put let people know where they can find you on social media. And I know you have a couple of support links. I'll put those down below as well. I'll put those down below. If there's anything you want me to put down below in the show notes as well, do let me know.
Yeah, just whatever, well, I should say, to close out, thank you very much for having me on.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate the opportunity, and apologies sometimes if I am not reachable over comms. I go long periods where I just I don't do any, this is my phone, generally speaking, so.
Can't fault it.
Yeah, you need to detach yourself from a lot of this stuff sometimes. So, but anyway, that's kind of justification for being hard to reach. I apologize if that is the case.
No problem at all, honestly.
Do just give me a call anytime if you need. But yeah, mate, I really appreciate you having me on. I appreciate everybody that's listening. And if you want, I'm John Carr, British Uprising on YouTube, and just John Carr _John _Carr on X. So anyway, people can just support or whatever. That's brilliant, and make sure you subscribe to George.
Thank you very much.
Subscribe to this channel because he's a good guy.
But yes, John has a lot of good, interesting content as well, ladies and gentlemen. Whether you may have things on there. Like, one of the most contentious topics we talked about was the conflict going on in the Middle East at the moment. He does do a lot of good, interesting, thought-provoking videos on this kind of stuff, however. And also, if you want to follow the activities, particularly with the, nationalist scene in Scotland, for example, the protests that are going on and all of those things, you'll find those on John's channel as well. And you'll go and watch one of those speeches, you'll find exactly what I mean when I said he's a very gifted public speaker. He absolutely is. And you can, as I mentioned before, with a lot of the lefty protests, you can tell they're, plastic protests, if you will. They have no substance to them. You can really see the passion and the sentiment come through when you hear people like John, when you hear people like Josh Fernie, who I spoke to before. You can see the actual, true, passion and resolve, if you will, come through in that. So I strongly recommend you go check out John's channel as well. Well, thank you very much, John. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Cheers.
Have a good one, guys. We'll see you again next time. Godspeed.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. My conversation with Mr. John Carr. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful and insightful. I know I certainly did. Loads of contentious topics in there that we talked about, loads of very important ones. So I'm looking forward to seeing your comments down below. Hopefully this conversation will do well in terms of views and reception, etc., because there's a lot of very important things that we talked about. We're in a very, very uncertain time in the UK at the moment. That being said, the one question I have for you today, ladies and gentlemen, is a little bit different. We could talk about all manner of things. Could be questions to do with, the section we talked about on the Middle East, Israel, potentially even a, false flag where the IDF were told to stand down on October the 7th, and potentially that was used as an impetus to go into Gaza, right? Many things that we can ask, but bringing it back to the UK, obviously one of the big things that I notice is we get so bogged down in things that are going on elsewhere in the world, particularly with regards to the Middle East, particularly with regards to Israel and all these things, that we lose sight of things going on at home. I think the answer to this question is a certain no, but I want to know your insights. If the British, ladies and gentlemen, i.e. the native peoples of these isles, the native peoples of Wales, England, Scotland and Ireland, were to be made minority status, right? If we were to reach that point and actually surpass it, and the natives were actually made a minority, do you think there would be the same push for diversity and equity and inclusion and all of these other things the minute that happens? Do you think that we would be afforded the same grace that we have afforded people that have come to these lands, where if you look in many areas where these people have dominated, like Luton, like Oldham, Telford, London, all of these other areas, it's never turned out well, it seems, for the native populace in large part. So I want to ask you, do you think we'll be afforded the same grace? My answer, or at least my perspective at the moment, is no. A solid no. And that's why I think we should be putting a lot more focus on this than it's actually getting at the moment. And whether you want it to be about this or not, it is something you're going to have to contend with at some point. Minority rights for us is basically going to be the same as no rights. The minute we hit minority status, we lose, all pretty much all democratic representation. And that could be the end of it. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. Really appreciate it. Hope you find it useful. As I said, make sure you go over and check out John's channel, follow him on X. And yeah, looking forward to catching up with you soon. You take care, guys. See you next time. Godspeed.